What happens when an entitled royal meets one of television's most no-nonsense hosts? Well, you're about to find out because what went down on The View recently has Hollywood buzzing and the royal watchers absolutely losing their minds. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation that ended with security being called, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this story is going to leave you speechless. It all started what seemed like a routine booking. For The View, Meghan Markle was scheduled to appear as a guest to discuss her latest charitable endeavors and upcoming projects. The show's producers were thrilled to land such a high-profile guest, and Whoopi Goldberg, as the show's moderator, was prepared for what she thought would be a standard celebrity interview. But from the moment Meghan walked onto the set, something felt different. The usual pre-show pleasantries were notably strained, with Meghan's team making last-minute demands about camera angles, lighting adjustments, and even requesting that certain topics be completely off-limits. Whoopi, who has been in the business for decades and has interviewed everyone from presidents to pop stars, raised an eyebrow at the extensive list of restrictions. "I've never seen anything quite like this," whispered one of the show's longtime producers to a colleague as they watched Meghan's publicist hand over a 3-page document outlining what could and couldn't be discussed. Even A-list celebrities don't usually come with this many conditions. As the cameras began rolling, Whoopi opened with her characteristic warmth and professionalism. "We're here with Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, to talk about her incredible work and what she's been up to lately. Meghan, thank you so much for being here with us today." Meghan smiled, but there was something calculated about it, something that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. Though I do hope we can keep this conversation focused on the positive work I'm doing rather than dwelling on negativity." Whoopi nodded diplomatically. "Of course, we're here to talk about your projects. I understand you've been working on some exciting new initiatives." "That's right," Meghan replied, sitting back in her chair with an air of superiority that was immediately noticeable to the studio audience. "I've been working tirelessly to create meaningful change in the world, something that I think sets me apart from other public figures who are more focused on superficial pursuits." The subtle dig didn't go unnoticed by Whoopi, whose expression remained neutral but whose eyes sharpened slightly. "That's wonderful. Can you tell us more about these specific initiatives?" Meghan launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about empowerment and global change, but her tone was condescending, as if she were explaining complex concepts to children rather than speaking to an intelligent television audience and an accomplished host. "You see, Whoopi," Meghan continued, "not everyone understands the level of sacrifice required to truly make a difference. When you've lived the life I've lived, experienced what I've experienced, you develop a unique perspective that allows you to see solutions that others simply cannot comprehend." Whoopi's eyebrows rose slightly. In her decades of hosting, she had encountered her share of difficult guests, but Meghan's combination of self-importance and barely concealed arrogance was something special. "That's an interesting perspective," Whoopi said carefully. "I'm curious about how you balance your advocacy work with your other responsibilities and commitments." Meghan's smile became even more forced. "Well, unlike some people, I don't have the luxury of just showing up and reading from a teleprompter. My work requires deep thought, careful consideration, and a level of intelligence that, frankly, not everyone in this industry possesses." The studio fell silent. Even the usually chatty audience seemed to sense that something uncomfortable was happening. Whoopi's co-hosts exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond to what was clearly becoming a tense situation. Whoopi, however, maintained her composure with the skill of a seasoned professional. "That's quite a statement, Meghan. Are you suggesting that television hosts don't think deeply about their work?" "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything," Meghan replied with a laugh that sounded more like a dismissal. "I'm simply stating that there are different levels of intellectual engagement required for different types of work. Some people read scripts. Others create meaningful change in the world." The insult was clear, and Whoopi's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had been in the entertainment industry long enough to handle difficult personalities, but Meghan's blatant disrespect was testing even her legendary patience. "I see," Whoopi said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. "So you're saying that hosting a television show, interviewing world leaders, discussing complex social issues, and engaging with diverse perspectives daily doesn't require intellectual engagement. Meghan seemed oblivious to the warning signs in Whoopi's tone. I'm saying that there's a difference between discussing issues and actually solving them. Anyone can talk about problems, but it takes a special kind of person to step up and create real solutions. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Whoopi leaned forward slightly, her famous composure beginning to crack as she processed what she had just heard. The audience, sensing the shift in energy, had gone completely quiet, and even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. A special kind of person, Whoopi repeated slowly, her voice carrying a dangerous undertone that anyone familiar with her work would recognize as a warning. Meghan, I've been in this business for over 4 decades. I've won an Oscar, a Grammy, an Emmy, and a Tony. I've used my platform to discuss everything from civil rights to women's issues to social justice. Are you telling me that's not creating real change? Meghan's smile faltered for just a moment, but her arrogance quickly reasserted itself. Whoopi, I'm not trying to diminish your accomplishments, but there's a difference between entertainment and actual impact. When you've married into the British royal family and then had the courage to step away from that institution to pursue authentic work, you understand sacrifice in a way that others simply cannot. The audacity of the statement left the entire studio stunned. Joy Behar, sitting next to Whoopi, actually gasped audibly. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Even the usually diplomatic Sunny Hostin seemed at a loss for words that Whoopi's eyes narrowed dangerously. Excuse me? Did you just suggest that I don't understand sacrifice? That my work isn't authentic? I'm simply saying that some of us have put everything on the line for our principles, Meghan continued, apparently oblivious to the volcanic reaction she was creating. Not everyone has the strength to walk away from privilege and comfort to stand up for what's right. Some people are content to stay in their comfortable positions and just talk about change rather than actually creating it. The camera caught Whoopi's hands gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles visibly white. Her co-hosts looked terrified, knowing that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the show's history. Let me get this straight, Whoopi said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm that was somehow more intimidating than if she had started shouting. You're sitting here, on my show, suggesting that I've lived a life of comfort and privilege, that I haven't sacrificed anything for my beliefs. Meghan, incredibly, doubled down. I'm not making this personal, Whoopi. I'm simply stating facts about different types of experiences and the wisdom they provide. When you've been scrutinized by the global media, when you've faced racism at the highest levels of British society, when you've had to choose between your mental health and maintaining appearances, you develop a perspective that shapes everything you do moving forward. Are you seriously trying to lecture me about racism? Whoopi's voice was getting louder now, her legendary self-control finally beginning to slip. Are you actually sitting there, talking to a black woman who grew up in poverty, who fought for every opportunity she ever had, who has been speaking out against racism and injustice since before you were born, and trying to tell me about facing discrimination? The studio audience was completely silent now, watching what was clearly becoming an explosive confrontation. The producers in the control room were frantically signaling to each other, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let. This historic meltdown continued up. Meghan's facade was starting to crack, but instead of backing down, she became even more defensive. I never said you hadn't faced challenges, Whoopi, but there's a difference between facing racism as a celebrity and facing it as someone married into the most traditional, conservative institution in the world. The stakes are simply different. The stakes are different. Whoopi was on her feet now, something that rarely happened during interviews. You want to talk about stakes? I was fighting for civil rights when facing racism could get you killed. I was speaking out against injustice when it could end your career permanently. I was using my platform to create change when there were real consequences for doing so. But that was a different time, Meghan protested, her voice taking on a whining quality that made her sound even more entitled. The challenges I've faced are unique to the modern era, to social media, to the global spotlight in ways that previous generations simply couldn't understand. The sheer audacity of dismissing decades of civil rights struggles as irrelevant to the modern era was the final straw. Whoopi's voice rose to a level that everyone in the studio would remember for the rest of their lives. Are you out of your mind? Did you just dismiss the entire civil rights movement as irrelevant because it happened before Twitter existed? Did you just suggest that facing racism in the age of social media is somehow worse than facing it when people were being lynched for speaking out? Meghan's composure finally began to crumble as she realized she had pushed too far, but her response showed she still didn't understand the magnitude of her mistake. I'm not comparing our struggles. I'm simply saying that each generation faces unique challenges, and mine happen to be particularly complex because of the global nature of modern media and the institution I was part of. Your struggles? Whoopi was practically shouting now. You married a prince. You lived in a palace. And when things got difficult, you had the privilege to walk away and sign multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify. That's not struggle. That's convenience. The audience was completely captivated, watching a masterclass in how not to handle a television interview. Meghan's face was flushed, her carefully crafted public persona crumbling in real time as she faced genuine pushback for perhaps the first time in years. You don't understand the pressure I was under, Meghan snapped, her voice rising to match Whoopi's energy. You don't know what it's like to have every single thing you do analyzed and criticized by people who were determined to destroy you from day one. I don't know what that's like. Whoopi's laugh was sharp and bitter. I've been a black woman in Hollywood for 40 years. I've been criticized, analyzed, and attacked by people who wanted to see me fail since the day I started performing. The difference is, I didn't run to Oprah crying about it, and I certainly didn't come on someone else's show acting like I invented facing adversity. The confrontation had reached a boiling point that no one in the studio had ever witnessed before. Meghan's face was now completely red, her carefully maintained composure entirely shattered as she found herself in a battle of wits she was clearly losing. The other co-hosts sat frozen, watching their colleague dismantle a guest with surgical precision. You know what your problem is? Whoopi continued, her voice filled with decades of frustration at entitled behavior. You think suffering is a competition, and you think your suffering is somehow more important, more meaningful, more deserving of attention than anyone else's. That's not advocacy, that's narcissism. Meghan's eyes flashed dangerously. How dare you psychoanalyze me on national television? This is completely unprofessional behavior, and I won't stand for it. Unprofessional. Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. You came on my show, insulted my intelligence, dismissed my life's work, lectured me about racism like I was a child, and now you want to talk about professionalism? I never insulted anyone, Meghan protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I was simply trying to share my perspective and experiences. Your perspective? Whoopi leaned forward, her voice dripping with disbelief. Your perspective that everyone else's work is somehow lesser than yours? Your perspective that marrying into privilege and then complaining about it makes you more enlightened than people who actually fought for their success? The studio audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't just a disagreement between two celebrities. This was a masterclass in accountability that was playing out in real time. Meghan was being held responsible for her words and actions in a way that clearly hadn't happened to her in a very long time. I have fought for my success. Meghan shot back, her voice becoming shrill. I worked as an actress. I built my own career before I ever met Harry, and I've used my platform to create meaningful change in the world. You worked as an actress on a cable show that most people never watched, Whoopi replied without missing a beat. And using your platform? You mean the platform you got by marrying a prince? The same platform you're now using to criticize the very institution that gave it to you. Meghan's mouth opened and closed several times, clearly struggling to find a response that wouldn't make her look even worse. My marriage to Harry was about love, not platform building. Then why are you constantly talking about it? Whoopi pressed. Why is every single project you do, every interview you give, every statement you make somehow connected to your time as a royal? If it was just about love, why can't you move on and let your work speak for itself? The question hung in the air, like a challenge. Meghan's handlers in the wings were frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, but the show's producers were too captivated by the historic nature of what they were witnessing to interrupt. Because people won't let me move on, Meghan finally replied, but her voice sounded weak and defensive. The media constantly brings up my royal connections, so I have to address them. No, you don't, Whoopi said firmly. You choose to address them because they're profitable. Every time you talk about your royal experience, You get headlines, you get attention, you get paid. Don't pretend you're a victim of circumstances you're actively perpetuating. Meghan's facade finally cracked. Completely. You have no right to speak to me this way. I came here as a guest, and you're treating me with complete disrespect. Respect? Whoopi's voice rose again. You want to talk about respect? You came on my show and disrespected me, my career, my life experiences, and my intelligence. You sat there with that condescending smile and acted like you were doing us all a favor by gracing us with your presence. That's not how respect works. The audience began to murmur among themselves, clearly taking sides in this unprecedented confrontation. Security personnel were now visible at the edges of the set, though they seemed unsure whether to intervene or let the drama continue. I think this interview is over, Meghan announced, starting to remove her microphone. I won't sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly has personal issues with me. Personal issues? Whoopi laughed bitterly. I don't have personal issues with you, Meghan. I don't know you well enough to have personal issues. What I have is a problem with entitled behavior and people who think their problems are more important than everyone else's. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is harassment, and I'm leaving. Then leave, Whoopi said calmly, settling back in her chair. But don't expect anyone to feel sorry for you when you tell this story. Later, you came here acting like you were better than everyone else, and when you got called out on it, you couldn't handle the heat. You'll be hearing from my lawyers, Meghan snapped as she stormed toward the exit, her entourage scrambling to follow her. Good, Whoopi called after her. Tell them to watch the tape. Everything you said is on record. As Meghan disappeared from the set, followed by her flustered publicist and assistants, the studio erupted in spontaneous applause. The audience, who had watched the entire confrontation unfold, seemed to be showing their support for Whoopi's unwavering stance against entitled behavior. Whoopi turned back to the camera, her composure returning as quickly as it had left. Well, folks, that's what happens when you mistake privilege for wisdom and entitlement for enlightenment. Sometimes people need to hear the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The other co-hosts, who had remained silent throughout the explosive exchange, finally found their voices. Joy Behar was the first to speak. Whoopi, I've never seen anything like that in all my years on television. Neither have I, Whoopi replied, straightening her papers. But sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Nobody gets to come on this show and disrespect our audience, our work, or our experiences. The cameras continued rolling as the show's producers decided to let the historic moment play out naturally. This wasn't just television, this was a cultural moment that would be discussed and analyzed for years to come. As the show went to commercial, the audience continued to buzz with excitement and disbelief at what they had just witnessed. They had come expecting a routine celebrity interview, and instead had seen a masterclass in accountability and a reminder that actions have consequences, even for those who think they're above criticism. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen a celebrity interview go this wrong before? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. What other celebrity meltdowns would you like to see covered next?